And let me start first with Nia Maloo, who's a lecturer in architecture and a registered architect. She's a lecturer at Howard University, if you can't tell from her background. She has a bachelor and master's in architecture and planning from Anna University in India. And she was recently announced as the winner of the 2022 Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture for the Course Development Prize for creating the first ever architecture course focused entirely on building decarbonization. And we're very excited about that, Nia. Congratulations. So Dean Bailey is also with us. He's recently completed his Bachelor of Architecture at Howard University and is going to pursue his Master's of Architecture next year, also at Howard. He's a student, he was a student in Howard's first ever building decarbonization class taught by Professor Maloo. And this summer, he's going to be working as a show set design intern at Walt Disney Imagineering, which is great. Hopefully you can get them to do something about building decarbonization. That would be awesome. Anyway, I'd also like to introduce Dr. Ray Tesiero, who holds a full-time faculty position in architectural engineering at North Carolina A&T University, teaching mechanical engineering subjects. He has a BS in mechanical engineering from Rochester Institute of Technology and a PhD from NCA&T. So welcome, Ray. Thank you very much. And Zaria Ancar is a student of Professor Tesiero's at NCA&T. During the past year, she participated in the first iteration of NCA&T's Architectural Engineering Capstone Project class to incorporate building decarbonization, and was primarily focused on the mechanical system design in that class. So we've got two professors and we've got two students, and this should be very, very interesting. And we want to iterate to the students that you're not getting graded today, and we want you to be totally honest today as well. Okay. So the first question, I want to ask it to Zaria and Dean, if we could. What are your feelings about climate change as a young person and a college student? Do you know anything about, or did you know anything about building decarbonization before you started the class where it was brought up? If not, were you convinced, or what convinced you? So if you could maybe Zaria start and give us a couple thoughts on that, that'd be great.
Okay. Hi, everyone. What I think about climate change, I think it's kind of scary, just seeing how the environment, or I guess how Earth is responding. This is our only home, so it'd be nice to take care of it. So just being a part of that change of which we're innovating systems and focusing on decarbonization to help our environment be a little healthier, it gives hope. I didn't know much about decarbonization before I came to A&T. The only things that I did know was just about the CO2 emissions of architecture, the architectural industry as a whole, but I never knew anything about like how to decarbonize or speaking on it as like one specific subject.
Okay,
Great.
I'll take over. Oh,
sorry, I had to unmute myself. It wouldn't be a Zoom call without that. But Dean, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, once again, my name is Dean Bailey. I'm a rising fifth-year architecture major from Northern Virginia at Howard University in the 5-year master's program. I sort of always knew about climate change from a very young age. I was lucky enough to go to schools that were actually teaching that to sort of elementary school students, and so I was aware of it. And I've always felt very strongly about it in terms of not only improving it, but sort of addressing it in the way that it starts to affect our everyday as well as our planet. I think that through some of the classes I took with Professor Maloo, we actually covered this idea of decarbonization in buildings as sort of a concept and how it would begin to work. And she actually proposed the idea of the class during one of my junior year semesters. And so I was aware of it because of that. But had it not been for her, I don't think I would have been aware of the concept. In terms of what to do about the current climate crisis, I definitely think sort of the moderation of buildings and their carbon emissions is the right direction. But I think the whole thing is an iterative process. Something that I've been learning recently because of all of the classes we've had to take in our architecture curriculum. I think that I, as a student, and probably some of my compatriots, are very well versed in this idea of sustainability, whether that means like turning off lights when you're leaving a space, or how to recycle versus what can or can't be recycled. And I think it was this year that I realized that sort of privilege, and that people don't have that sort of wherewithal to make those decisions day to day. And so I'm really into the idea of sort of educating people in that realm, especially considering a lot of people don't know exactly how to be sustainable in their day-to-day life. And personally, it's a pet peeve of mine when I see, trash in the recycling bin or vice versa.
Indeed. Great. All right. So, Ray and Nia, do you feel like your students in our classroom are understanding climate change, and what's their response or feeling about this decarbonization subject? Nia, would you like to start?
Sure. Again, I'm going to piggyback from my student, Dean. He's a fantastic student. It's a pleasure to have taught him. No, there was no pushback. They were actually very encouraged and enthusiastic, just because students want to make a difference and they want to save the planet. They know the burden is on them. And I feel like the students who come to me, and I'm sure Professor Ray will say the similar thing, but they want actionable item. And building decarbonization as a course was a very actionable item which they can implement. And so I didn't get any pushback other than just enrollment for summer. The other question you asked is about, no, there was no pushback on building decarbonization. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, great. Ray?
Yeah, I felt the same way. There was no pushback at all, and students are very interested in the subject. And I do agree that students are interested in helping the planet. So the one thing that I think as educators we can do is, help the students with some of the misconceptions of global warming and, some of the reliance on televised news media, things like that. They get a little bit confusing. So as educators, we can help steer them in the right direction. But I felt introducing it into a senior level course that had, I'm in the curriculum of architectural engineering, so it fit very well in there. We have 4 disciplines that we teach. I'm on the mechanical side, but my colleagues teach the, architectural side, structural side, and electrical side. And so we each took a piece of decarbonization, introduced it into our sections of the course. And I felt it went very well. We introduced it again in senior project 2. So I really enjoyed introducing decarbonization. It kind of took us off track of teaching the old style central plant system, and go to more electric heat pumps and think about solar panels and things like that in nature. So I do believe we're going to just continue to move in that type of direction.
Great. Super. That's great, Ray. I like that, new way of thinking. It also challenges us as professors to teach it or think about it differently. So, all right. So back to Dean and Zaria. What advice would you give a professor that's embarking on teaching building decarbonization? I'm not asking you to give feedback to your professors here, but more generally to other professors who are on the call today, who are teaching these topics in one form or another. What advice would you give them? Zaria, would you like to go first? Or?
Yes. I think probably first and foremost, like just creating that enthusiasm for stressing this the subject and the importance of the matter of decarbonization. I think that would allow students to develop their own perspectives on decarbonization and kind of how they want to tackle it dependent on their discipline. As Dr. Tesiero said, like with our program, we do split it up into different disciplines. So I think that would help students probably be more creative or like adventurous with looking for different routes to decarbonize. And then yes, just a good understanding, but then allowing the student to research things themselves and collect data on like impacts and things like that. And so for me this semester, I was a part of the structural side of our decarbonization. So we looked at, the amount of CO2 that's produced when producing a certain amount of steel, something like that. And then from there, we had the freedom to look at different materials. I think the more explorative approach is pretty effective.
Great. Super. All right. Dean, what do you think? What advice do you have for other professors who are going to be teaching this topic?
Yeah, I think that especially in terms of educating people on the subject, make it something that is normalized. I think definitely avoid falling into a certain pattern of educating in which it's monotonous. However, I do think focus on making it something standard for people to know. Like an issue that I noticed is that a lot of my classmates did not have the same opportunity to take the course that I did. And it became something that is important in sort of our current meta in terms of what we're doing as architecture students. And so now I have a level of education on the subject that they don't have, and a level of sort of tool usage and skill application that they don't have. And so I think the accessibility is definitely something that should become more of an item in terms of teaching the subject, especially considering how niche of a subject it is. I think that niche narrative needs to be erased, and that would be done by sort of a widespread educational practice of it.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. I think normalizing it is the word you use. I think that's something that it would be easy to do and so important. So, thank you for that. Ray or Nia, do you guys have any advice for other professors now that you've tried doing this? What would you say to folks who have not yet taught decarbonization and are thinking about starting it? Ray, would you want to go first?
Sure. I felt it was relatively easy to implement, especially in our curriculum, in our course. It might be difficult in a course that's only meeting 2.5 hours a week for 16 weeks, but our senior design course meets 6 hours a week. And I think most senior design, senior project courses do meet about that. So it was fairly easy to introduce it. You take, one of the 2-hour meetings and introduce decarbonization. You might come again a couple of weeks later and do it again. But after that, the students are implementing into their design. And also a big thing that, we try to meet is the ABET outcome. So if you're an ABET accredited curriculum, then one of the engineering outcomes is the ability to apply engineering design to produce solutions that meet specified needs with consideration of public health, safety, welfare, as well as global, cultural, social, environmental, and economic factors. So decarbonization in your teaching and design helps the students meet that outcome. So I thought it's very important, especially in the architectural engineering world.
Great. Nia?
Yes, I would agree with Ray's point of view. It's not hard to embrace it because all of us in architects teach some kind of sustainability, a part of curriculum. But one thing I did find that is very fun in building decarbonization, because it's the current topic and it's not like the past topic. So it's so relevant to actually teach it because it enhances the curriculum.
Right.
So, you're not teaching how to build something which is done 100 years ago. You want to these future students to take actionable items and have these skills, because then they would be implementing it. So kind of, I felt like it enhances the curriculum. And I would say to all professors to educate more students, so more and more of them have the skill as they hit the workforce.
Great. Okay. So here's a question I'd like to ask for everybody. And, what has worked and what hasn't worked? And when you've been teaching decarbonization, what seems to resonate as a student or as a professor with the students, and what things, hasn't worked? So, again, being really sort of open and honest about it. Let's see. Dean, would you like to go first, or?
Yeah, something that was definitely difficult to wrap my head around, I think, were the energy calculations. And that's not for, a lack of good teaching as much as it is just a lot to understand in a short period of time. And so I think that there sort of becomes a point where I think the curriculum should slow to really make sure that everyone is getting it and what's being measured and why it's being measured, as opposed to sort of just a quick run through of it on, say, a spreadsheet. Because it's valuable information to have and definitely something that you'll want to replicate moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. Decarbonization can get a little technical or cross-cutting as far as disciplines. So, if we're studying just architecture or just engineering, it can be, introducing new topics. So yeah, that's good point. Ray, what do you think?
I felt the materials that you all supplied worked great for, I want to make sure that everyone's clear. We didn't, teach a course on decarbonization. We introduced it into a current course, and we took maybe 4 hours of our 16 weeks to introduce it into our project. But I kind of agree with Dean. It would be nice because, the textbooks we have, and, it's triggered something to say when Dr. Maloo mentioned it, was the textbooks that we have are textbooks that we've been using for the last, whatever, 5-10 years, and they don't have decarbonization in it. So it would be nice to have more information on, the calculations of taking a building and then applying decarbonization techniques to upgrade it and make it more efficient, and then see the results. Those kind of things would be helpful for the students because that information isn't really available.
Yeah, great.
But
comment.
outside of that, I think it was, decarbonization covers such a wide range of subjects. I don't cover wind, solar, hydropower, geothermal things. I don't cover that. I cover mechanical HVAC systems. And so we went to electrical heat pumps in this version of decarbonization, but I can't speak for the structural guys, the electrical guys, the architectural guy,
yeah.
But I would like to see a little bit more example problems that we could have the students possibly do or work on.
That's great. Yeah, good calculations again, right? Okay, Professor Maloo.
I would agree. We're an architectural curriculum. Other than structures, that's the only math we do. I think what worked for us was the online format, having the flexibility for students. We did this in summer, so they could actually go for internship and do it. But it also had a little drawback where you couldn't actually get a feedback that the student didn't understand. So I think this hybrid teaching has its pluses and minuses. One of the biggest plus was we were able to do this. A student can actually go for a full-time job, and Peter from Pacific Coast can join us, and guests can join us. So I think the hybrid format and having the flexibility of a global touch really helped. I would agree with the energy calculation, but I would say that if that's all they didn't get, but they got the crux of the concept, I think we were a successful course. because they can learn that, and energy calculations are going to change the minute you learn. So with the software, so I'm happy with my course, kind of.
Great. Great. All right. Zaria?
Yes. I want to say what has worked is taking the collaborative approach. So working in groups. I know in the course we worked on our spreadsheets together and built the spreadsheet as a whole with, you know, the students and the professor. So having that guidance as well as listening to one another was very beneficial. I do want to comment on something that Dean said, which was, you know, having that time to kind of slow down and focus on the aspect itself. I think just with senior projects and just capstones in general, it can feel pretty fast paced, especially when you're working on something large and working in collaboration with others. Sometimes things can feel a little jumbled up and pretty fast moving. So I think it would be nice to have some aspect of which like a dedicated time to just really focus on decarbonization of that matter, or even to just introduce other disciplines briefly would be nice.
Great. But I just want to make a point that there's a little difference in that Professor Maloo did a class that was a whole class about decarbonization, touching upon a lot of different subjects. And Professor Tesiero did a existing class, slotted in little a lecture here and there about decarbonization. So there's definitely different ways of doing it. And to get back to Dean's comment of making it something that all students are made aware of, I think this idea of slotting this discussion about decarbonization in existing courses has a lot of validity and is it's an important way to go, but both are important. So we have a few questions from the audience, and Avril is going to join us to ask those questions.
So the first question we got is a bit more specific, so it might be a little hard to answer off the cuff, but I think it would be useful to maybe give an idea. So Sanya LeBlanc from George Washington University is asking, can you provide specific examples of what you teach within the category of building decarbonization? What are the units, topics, assessments, etc.? So maybe if the professors could just give a bit of an idea of the topics they're covering.
I can go first. So we created a building decarbonization from theory to practice. So the objective of the course was to not only expose the student on building decarbonization, but also have an application and how to do it. And we used the AI headquarters as our main study of implementation. And so that was the course model where the student learned the subject matter and applied it in a design. It was an existing building. AI headquarters is going through building decarbonization. So it was a very relevant problem for the students to apply the skill they just learned. I guess that's, I'll stop with that. And it was completely architecture students. So they come with that. And so this exposed them to new software skills, which they didn't have, and energy calculations. So there was a lot of other things it got enhanced because of the course.
And like I mentioned earlier, in our class, we used it in Senior Design 1 and Senior Project 2. And same thing, we introduced it in 4 different disciplines. I only run the mechanical side of buildings, so I can only speak on that side of things. But the way we did it was to show how getting away from, a central plant system and going to, efficient electric heat pumps, and then collaborating with the electrical group that were putting solar panels on the roofs and the parking lots would help power some of the heat pump energy usage. So we incorporated into a healthcare facility that we had chosen for the students to build this year. And we incorporated decarbonization in 4 different disciplines.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have another question for the professors. So building on decarbonization, education, and implementation, what is the role of on-site experience for students in a construction environment?
Could you repeat that, Daryl, the end?
Yeah,
What
what
is
is the role of on-site experience for students in a construction environment? Oh, Dean, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, I was about to say, so actually during our building decarbonization course, I was doing an internship on Howard's campus where I worked with the construction company Gilbane as a construction management intern. And so I functioned in the superintendent role and was able to see a lot of what we were talking about and sort of its importance and the nuances between them during not only our course, but the course of the internship. And what I will say is that it made it a lot realer. Definitely when we started talking about sort of concrete and the way that concrete is not the most sustainable, I was definitely able to see that on site every day with, you know, the dust that was coming up or the silica or whatever was being put into the air by the concrete. Additionally, at some point, I was actually moving air handling units with a team of construction workers into the place. And so I was able to get sort of a full scope of not only the size of them, but the weight of them, how they function, their importance, how they needed to be maintained. I was actually put in charge of, they had sort of a dehumidifying agent. So I was in charge of dealing with the dehumidifiers and contacting the electrician or whoever else while that was all happening. And so what I will say is that actual site experience is definitely important. And I think that building decarbonization specifically is something that benefits from that linkage. However, I don't think you lose a whole ton from not having that same connection, as I feel like my classmates definitely had enriching experiences, maybe different from my own and maybe different in sort of how it was enriching, but I do think still important and of value considering the course. And so just in short, I think that on-site experience is definitely important and definitely a valuable thing to have. However, I don't think it makes or breaks this specific course load.
Great, thank you, Dean. Yeah, or Ray, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm just going to add one thing. We did a field visit for the AIA headquarters. So they did get a site context, but we were having a little bit COVID restriction. And in retrospect, we should have had the field visit before we started, I mean, just in the first week, so that they could actually see the building. I think decarbonization is like any other design planning. It's hard to see it implemented on site immediately. So I think it's a more planning proposition than a field proposition where you're building a concrete block. So I'm going to say that 90% is your planning for it. 10% is field.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment that decarbonization is really on the planning side more than the on-site visual side, because what you see on site is after the planning. So, yeah, we didn't really have an on-site component to our senior design, so I couldn't really speak too much about that. But I agree with what Dean and Dr. Maloo said.
Yeah.
All right. Zaria, did you want to add anything, or should we jump to the next question?
Well, I did want to say that maybe not necessarily. I guess this isn't like exactly in alignment with the question exactly, but I did want to comment on having site visits or something similar. I did go on a plant tour in a different course, but it was just good exposure to just the industry. And even just going inside, seeing how things are. I like do that on a regular basis now. Every time I walk in a building, I'm looking up. So yeah, I think it's always good to have, I guess, that do that in an academic environment. But I agree that on-site visits, I don't see it as being too impactful on the decarbonization side.
Great, thank you. So we have one more audience question. Any feedback yet from any industry partners on the value of decarbonization curriculum? Are there skills or knowledge they are looking for from graduates? Nia, do you want to start us off?
Yes, I would say yes. They are looking for skills like this. And I can also speak to the fact that because of this skill, we did participate in Solar Design Challenge this year. Howard participated for the first time, and our team did building decarbonization. So after the fact, we're still having the ripple effect of the students presenting their project. Many institutions are requesting for the students to come for an interview, to present again. So is it specifically for building decarbonization? I would say yes, because it is what, and also specifically the students' design was also pretty profound and the whole collaborative effort. So I do think directly they have not reached out to me, but they have seen the product, and I've been getting a lot of actually wonderful emails saying that they would love to hire the students as soon as they graduate. Some are saying, can you make sure they intern with me? So I would say it's a very positive impact.
Yeah, I agree. We usually invite industry to be judges at the end of their senior design presentation. And actually, Peter and Avril were judges last semester for our Senior Design 1 course. And we usually get very positive feedback from industry about implementing this decarbonization was a big piece last year and impressed a lot of the industry. So I agree. It's definitely very good knowledge, and it's something the industry is looking for.
So Avril, is that, you got it on the questions from the audience here?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we have a couple other questions that I would like to ask. And you've seen the different material that the BDLA has to offer. We've got slide presentations, there's videos, case studies, exercises, a variety of different things. Can you give some feedback? I'd like to ask both, students and professors on what types of material works best. And, part of this is trying to give us direction for the future of what should we be focusing on? Should it be, more videos or more slides or case studies, or what should it be? Professor Maloo, would you like to go?
Yes, I'm going to say Professor Peter, but Peter, I think the most impactful is seeing you. All those videos and slides are great, but having a discussion with a real person, so maybe a video interviews or a 2-minute, like a talk, would be very beneficial. I think slides is good, but it still doesn't give the perspective of the person who created it. And the one other thing is the case studies, like we did a component, which I enjoyed, is the global component, because decarbonization, even our chief guest today, Mark Chambers, said that it's a global, and we're just one segment. So to know how it's done everywhere would be a fantastic addition to the BDLA website.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Zaria, what do you think?
Yes, well, first, I just want to say I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak on my education and to just be able to put in some input for how I'm being taught the things that are going to propel me and prepare me for the career path that I've chosen. I think that working in groups is very good. I find that working in groups broadens my own thinking. I also love that we sometimes have industry professionals do tutorials for us in our courses. That helps a ton. It also just helps us actually helps us produce very quality work. Yes, and also to being taught different softwares, especially the softwares that are currently being used by professionals in the industry. We do learn older softwares because sometimes we may have to use that when actually doing things in the field, but also learning the new things as well so we remain competitive and knowledgeable is very, very beneficial as well.
Great. Dean, what do you think? What's the effective teaching tools here?
I actually would recommend something that I think we did as students that maybe the professors didn't. And I would even say that this might be valuable in all forms of education, but a dumb down at the end, like in terms of creating some sort of synopsis if the students were to put it in, I guess, the most descriptive layman terms they possibly could. I think that would help not only the students, but professors understand where the students were in terms of not only their learning, but their ability to regurgitate that information and apply it. Only considering that I think a lot of students will come out and be tripped up on the semantics or the terminology of whatever we've discussed. But I think if there were just a moment at the very end of whether it's the course or each class where the student goes down, or the teacher, professor goes down and acts sort of didactically toward the students and starts to ask them, hey, could you describe exactly what happened and why it's happening? I think that would be super beneficial. When we went to the competition in Colorado, actually, that was one of the things that really helped me speak during our presentations, was just to be able to look at the information and dumb it down as quickly as I could, because then I knew exactly what was going on. And if I needed to go deeper and deeper in to sort of the details of what was happening, the terminology was present, there were the diagrams, and it became something that was more eloquent, and I had a better root understanding of what was happening.
Yeah, I like that. So you were Dean, you were part of the Howard University Solar Decathlon team, right?
Yep.
And how was that?
It was fun. It was definitely an interesting experience. We worked all semester, and it felt oftentimes sort of like a sixth class on our course load. And with a heavy course load, I think it was an 18 credit load this past semester. So it was definitely an additional load, but it was fun. And going to Colorado was definitely enriching. Overall, a good experience. And I think I would do it again. I would definitely, I think next year maybe would prefer to help mentoring than actually participating, because, I have thesis to write. However, it was a good experience, and it was interesting seeing what other universities are doing and why and how, given their projects and the current environmental crisis, and seeing sort of the demographics of who was interested, the number of men versus the number of women, just, any ethnic groups that were part of it. I think that was something that was really eye-opening, and looking at how it's starting to affect the world and how people in the world are beginning to react to it and who's getting excited about it. And so I would recommend that to any university that's participating. And I think it's definitely something worthwhile sort of to delve into with your students, to give them not only that access toward the resources, but also this understanding and sort of wherewithal to speak on decarbonization as a concept.
Yeah. Did you, it sounds like you were observing, the different types of students that were at the competition in Colorado. What did you see?
Well, something that was really eye-opening is that it's a worldwide issue. There's definitely, I think there's a team that was directly from Iran, and none of them can make it in person. However, they were really enthusiastic and had a great presentation. They had their background. They were all set up. They obviously knew each other. There's one student who flew all the way in from, I think it was the University of India, and he was there by himself representing his team. And, you know, that's what a courageous venture to do all of that just for the building decarbonization, you know, not to belittle it. And then Howard was the only HBCU present. That was interesting. There are a lot of the schools from California that were working on it. I think UMass Amherst was present. And so it was interesting seeing that almost diaspora of students who were participating and their ages and their interests and how they were focused on competing. And so, a valuable experience.
That's great. Yeah, I wish I could have been there. Super. Professor Tesiero, back to this question of, you know, what do you think are the most effective tools when trying to get or teach the concept of decarbonization?
We used a lot of the tools that BDLA provided us, but I think one of the best tool that we used was we asked you to come and do a presentation for them. And, you know, a couple students mentioned this. I think even Dr. Maloo mentioned it also, is, you know, the students tend to react a little bit differently for a guest speaker, and they ask questions. It's almost like pulling teeth for me to get anyone to answer a question in my class, because, you know, they're just used to being, you know, a new face or whatever. They come in and give a new topic on a subject or something. It worked really well.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because, you know, one of the ideas that we've been having, obviously I only have so many hours in the day, but is to set up a sort of a volunteer list or a group of people in different geographical locations that are working, professionals that are working on building decarbonization, that would be willing to come physically to a university and give a guest lecture. Because this is, you know, there's people all over the country working in this area. And I think it would be really fun to see somebody locally working on decarbonization of one form or another. So maybe we should pursue that idea a little bit further. So great. You know, another question I have for our two professors is, and this is something that we're thinking about in the BDLA, what's the best way to share lessons learned? Because let's say you're learning things, and other professors who are getting started on teaching building decarbonization might like to know about what you've learned about, you know, what works and what doesn't work. Do you guys have any ideas on how we could help share the lessons learned? I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is that just because professors are busy, there's not a lot of, you know, sharing of what works and what doesn't work. Can we help in that? Catalyze that a little bit? What do you think, Professor Maloo?
I think a roundtable would be fantastic, where you get a bunch of professors. I think we do that for professional practice, and it really works, where we do 2 roundtables in a year, and we just talk about one single subject. We're very small presentation, but more of an open forum. I think professors love to talk. I think you are the medium to get us together. So I think that this symposium is good, but this doesn't have that interactive as much as we would like. A roundtable would be much more informal and something which is not recorded, so you are present to attend and contribute and not have an option would be a good one to do.
I like that. And is a roundtable normally done in person, or is it something that can be done virtually? Or
I think virtual you should do, because it just, I mean, of course, face-to-face has great value, but it requires a lot of money, time, and resources. But virtually, and not too many, just maybe annually or semi-annually. So kind of that people can save the date, and people who are interested will come, and you will have a more robust lessons learned and more ideas. I think we found it very robust in our registration board of Ancar.
I love that. Great. You know, as people in the Q&A or the chat, if you have some ideas that you'd like to share with us, please go ahead and type it in. If you've got some ideas on, what you think works and doesn't work, or best ways to share the lessons learned. Professor Tesiero, do you have some ideas on that, on how we could catalyze this discussion?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Maloo. You might be able to have a blog on your website, or what we're doing today, contributing on a webinar like this, meeting virtually, maybe have a advisory committee. I don't know. All those ideas are all virtually about the same thing, So.
Okay, great. So one more question here for the students, and then we'll wrap up. What more could you have learned in college about ways to address climate change? I think that students generally are concerned about climate change. I'm just wondering, from your perspectives, especially both of you are on the second half of your educational path here. What other things would you have liked to have learned about being able to address climate change? Or it could be just general. I would have liked to have known more about, how it works, or whatever. Zaria, would you like to start?
Yes, I can go first. I think that it would have been nice to have it introduced in some of like the earlier design courses, like somewhere in maybe my sophomore year. I want to say that we probably started talking about these things like spring of junior year and early senior semesters. That way I just would have some preliminary background to maybe just implement better ideas, or just so it doesn't feel so piled on in the end. Yes. I know with the architectural engineering curriculum, we focus on design too for a few courses. And it is mainly the explorative approach, which is like, hey, look up some sustainable strategies and implement them into your buildings. So I think just a little bit more guidance with that, or elaboration on some of those matters, instead of just quick like personal research. I think that would have been nice.
Great. Dean, what do you think?
To be honest, I was really satisfied with my, I think, sustainable education, especially by means of Howard. I really liked, because we go through a number of courses in our curriculum, from intro to sustainability to all, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the courses I took with Professor Maloo. And so there was a lot of iterating on this idea of sustainability and how you can be sustainable, and how even in the passive aspects of your lives, you can begin to be better to the planet and to the environment. I would even say that it has become a portion of my design ideals that I think I'm considering just automatically now, especially when I'm designing a building, thinking about how I can get closer to net zero or even net positive energy, and the ways that we can start to sort of manifest this idea of decarbonization into what we're building. And so I'm not really sure what could be done better. It's kind of driven into us, especially at Howard, just over and over and over again. And so I think I'm at a good point with it. I guess to other students, I would recommend maybe taking courses in the architecture curriculum, so that way you can start to have that sort of training in terms of how you're thinking, not only about your impact, but how the buildings and the buildings that already exist begin to impact sort of the global environment.
I couldn't think of a better way to end this session, Dean. Thank